"Don't send me back!" she cried, her voice breaking beneath the cold Wyoming night. The rancher stared at the terrified woman standing on his porch, soaked by rain, trembling from fear, and carrying nothing but a small worn suitcase. He had never seen her before, yet something in her eyes told him she had run from, something far worse than the storm. What happened next would force him to choose between the law, his reputation, and the woman who had nowhere else to go. Before we begin this emotional Old West story, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful Western stories, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable tales. Now let's get started. It was October 1887 when 38-year-old rancher Caleb Morgan heard 3 desperate knocks against his front door. Caleb lived alone on a sprawling ranch outside Cheyenne, Wyoming, where the nights were long and the wind seemed to whisper across the plains. He reached for the lantern and opened the door. A young woman stood before him. She looked about 27, with brown hair tangled by the rain and a faded blue dress covered in mud. Her name, he would soon learn, was Clara Bennett. "Please," she whispered, "don't send me back." Caleb looked past her toward the dark trail. "Back where?" Clara's lips trembled. "They're coming for me." Before Caleb could ask another question, the distant sound of horses echoed through the darkness. Clara grabbed his coat sleeve. "Please, mister. I know I have no right to ask, but if you give me shelter tonight, I swear I'll work for it." Caleb studied her frightened face. He had spent years learning not to involve himself in other people's troubles, but there was something about her fear that made walking away impossible. He stepped aside. "Get inside." Clara entered quickly and Caleb shut the door. Moments later, 3 riders appeared on the ridge. Caleb watched them through the window. One of the men carried a lantern and wore a black coat. He recognized him immediately. Silas. Crow was a wealthy landowner known throughout the county for his ruthless ways. Caleb turned toward Clara. "Who is he?" Clara lowered her eyes. "My husband's brother." Caleb frowned. "Your husband?" "My husband died 6 months ago," she said quietly. "Afterward, Silas claimed I had stolen money from the family. He wanted the ranch and I refused to sign it over. So he locked me in the house and said I would be sent away if I didn't cooperate." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you go to the sheriff?" Clara gave a bitter little smile. "Silas owns half the town. The sheriff is his friend." A loud knock struck the door. Caleb stepped in front of Clara. "Stay behind me." He opened the door only halfway. Silas stood outside with 2 men. "Caleb Morgan," he said. "We're looking for a woman who stole from my family." Caleb remained calm. "I haven't seen anyone." Silas glanced toward the interior. "Mind if we look?" "Yes," Caleb replied. "I do mind, Silas." His expression hardened. "That woman is dangerous." Caleb leaned against the doorframe. "Then you won't mind telling me why 3 armed men are chasing one frightened woman through a storm." Silas said nothing. After a tense moment, he finally warned, "You're making a mistake, Morgan." Caleb closed the door. Clara stood behind him, tears filling her eyes. "You shouldn't have done that." Caleb turned. "Maybe not, but nobody comes onto my land threatening someone under my roof." The next morning, Clara told him the entire story. Her late husband had secretly discovered that Silas was stealing money from the family business. Before he could expose him, he died under mysterious circumstances. Clara had found documents proving the theft, but Silas had searched the house and taken most of them. She had escaped with only 1 ledger hidden inside her suitcase. Caleb examined it carefully. The names and payments inside were enough to expose Silas, but they needed proof that could survive in court. Caleb decided to take Clara to Cheyenne. Before they could leave, however, Silas returned with the sheriff. "Hand her over," the sheriff demanded. Caleb stepped onto the porch. "You have a warrant?" The sheriff hesitated. Silas immediately produced a paper. Caleb looked at it and noticed the signature was dated 3 days after Clara's alleged crime. Something was wrong. He refused to surrender her. "We're going to Cheyenne," he said, "and she'll speak before a judge." Silas threatened him, but Caleb did not move. For the next 2 days, Caleb and Clara traveled toward town. Along the way, Clara slowly began to trust him. She discovered that beneath his quiet, Exterior was a man who had lost his wife years earlier and had never allowed himself to love anyone again. Caleb discovered that Clara was not helpless as Silas claimed. She was intelligent, brave, and determined to rebuild her life. When they finally reached Cheyenne, they brought the ledger before a federal investigator. The evidence revealed years of financial fraud. Silas was arrested, and the sheriff was removed from office for helping him. Clara was finally free. Months later, she returned to Caleb's ranch, not as a frightened woman seeking shelter, but as someone who had found her own strength. She stood on the porch and smiled. "You know, when I first came here, I thought I was running from my past." Caleb smiled softly. "And now?" Clara looked across the wide Wyoming plains. "Now I think I was running toward my future." Caleb took her hand. "Then stay." Clara squeezed his fingers. "That was the one thing I was hoping you'd say." Years later, people in the valley would still remember the night a frightened woman knocked on a rancher's door and begged him not to send her back. But Caleb always remembered it differently. To him, Clara had not been a woman who needed saving. She had been a woman who needed one person willing to stand beside her until she could save herself. And on that lonely Wyoming ranch, two broken hearts found something neither had expected: a second chance. So what do you think? Did Caleb make the right choice by standing between Clara and her past? If you enjoyed this emotional Western story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of courage, love, and second chances from the Old West. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.